Well, hey there. You came back. Time for some more podcasts, eh? Well, before we get into episode 160, let's give you some of the updates that have been going on over at RPGFan.com. So, hey, you may have noticed it's been a busy couple weeks over at the website. First of all, we dropped a new feature. RPG Fan's Music of the Year for 2018 was voted on by various members of the staff. We had a few specific editors throw in their favorites, and from all those tallies, you've got this beautiful feature that shows some of the best music that 2018 had to offer. Over in the reviews department, it's been jumping, for lack of a better term. We had Taylor Strumwasser, who was reviewing Demon Gaze 2, a traditional RPG that he gave only a modest 63% to, so go find out what he had to say about that and why it's not quite up to snuff, but still not a bad game. We had a rare retro review come out from Nathan Lee, who hopped back into Pokemon Coliseum to kind of fill in the blanks for us, and from what I understand, it's still a game worth going back to. God Eater 3 dropped not too long ago, and Audra Bowling jumped into that action RPG to let us know how she felt about it, and it seems it turned out pretty good. Myself, Greg Delmage, took a stab at Final Fantasy IX's remaster. We talk about it in this episode, but overall, I thought this return to the classic was pretty rad and gave it an editor's choice, so please check out the full review to find out more on what I had to say there. Bob Richardson played The Stillness of the Wind, which is a lovely looking adventure game that may not play as fun as other games, but lends argument to using video games as a medium to send messages and produce art beyond just being a simple means of distraction. Finally, Neil Chandran jumped into the visual novel How to Sing to Open Your Heart, which, to put it simply, it's a game, and he played it, and he recommends other games if you want to play those instead. Not that this one's bad, but it's there. Lastly, over in the music department, we got another couple reviews in there. I have been sitting on the Octopath Traveler original soundtrack for a long while, as it is a beast of a soundtrack, but I finally managed to put my thoughts to page and bring you this review of this massive soundtrack. As well, Patrick Gann, busy as always, looked at Corpse Party, Blood-Covered Sound Collection Volume 2 to follow up the Volume 1 review that I talked about a few episodes back. So please head on over to the website if you want to check out all these features, reviews, and more that I was just talking about. Now, without further ado, on to this little two-hander episode 160 of Random Encounter. Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Random Encounter. They still let us do these things, I know, right? My name's
crazy, aren't they?
Mike hasn't
They are
fired
fools!
us yet. We've had him deceived. He hasn't been listening lately, I guess, so.
This is all part of our, evil plan to take over RPG Fan and then the entire internet.
I mean, would that be so bad? We're good people.
Yeah, I think
the
we're good people.
internet's a scary place. We can clean it up, right? Mm-hmm. We'll just get Leona to be, like, the moderator of the internet, and everything will be great.
Yes.
And I can hear Leona scoffing at the prospect of that job.
Yeah, actually, no, I don't think she would want all that, because it can be bad enough sometimes
right.
With a small corner of the internet.
Well, exactly. Our small little Discord can be a handful. She's like, you want me to what? And that's my terrible Scottish accent.
Not that y'all on Discord are bad or evil or whatnot, just that sometimes the conversation is a mile a minute, and I have no clue how our mods, including Leona, follow all of that and rein people in. I wouldn't want that job.
Leona is definitely the hero we deserve. Mm-hmm. But that voice of the malicious evil mastermind who co-hosts with me is Kaylin Argyros.
Hey y'all, Leon Kazarel, of course. Eventually I won't have to say this, you'll all just, think it whenever I introduce myself.
It's just kind of part of the stream of consciousness, I guess, when he hears your voice. You just associate it with that. And as you have probably guessed by now, I'm Greg Delmage, at Greg Delmage on the Twitterverse, and GDelmy on the Discord. And we are here to talk about some RPGs that have been happening in life. It's break. My daughter's home, so we haven't had a chance, her and I, to play yet because she's been at her dad's for the past couple of days, but I'm sure we'll get back to our adventures in Chrono Trigger. As for myself, I've been covering a game for review, but between that, I've gone back to The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild.
Ooh.
I'm not quite done it, but I had taken a break for playing Final Fantasy IX. Annette and I have been playing more or less simultaneously, which is a challenge because we keep wanting to be like very loosely without trying to spoil things, because you can just discover so much in that game. Just kind of be like, hey, did you discover this vague thing? And they'll be like, as soon as the other person's like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Okay, cool. And just leave it at that. And so it's been a weird trying to talk about it, but not, because we just know that there's so many surprises you can have in that game. But she's finally starting to feel more confident with the combat, so she's making progress with fighting like the different Ganons and the like the Fireblight and whatnot Ganons inside of the Divine Beasts.
Yes.
Yeah, and meanwhile I finished off the fourth of the Divine Beast. My last one I tackled was Rudania. Is that the name of the lizard?
I haven't booted up Breath of the Wild in quite some time, so I don't remember their names.
I feel like that's the name.
I remember the lizard, though.
That was the last one I just tackled, so it was the last on my list, and I was wondering how challenging the fight might be, but I caught Annette was doing it a bit, and she was stumped on some stuff, but once she kind of figured it out, I was just like, oh, okay, that's it. And it was actually a very easy fight to plow through. One thing about that, though, is I'm very annoyed with myself having taken so long exploring the world, and I uncovered the entire map before I took out any of the other Divine Beasts. I started with, is it Vah Meadow? I forget the one that's the elephant one that's in the Zora's Domain. So I had Mipha's Grace power, but then I didn't have any of the other powers. I just went around exploring everything, and I finally took out the bird and got Rivali's Gale, and was like, this would have made climbing all of these towers so much easier. So I felt like kind of a fool in that aspect, but it still was kind of nice just seeing the entire map every time I booted up and being able to just go wherever the heck I please. So yeah, that's what I've been kind of playing for funsies, and it's been really great getting back to. I'm trying to get the last of the memories completed, and that's where I'm at right now. What about yourself? What have you been playing for fun when you're not grinding away for RPG Fan?
Well, aside from, of course, Final Fantasy 14, I'm doing that every week, still raiding with my static.
What are you raiding for, particularly?
So every expansion has the 8-man raids. A Realm Reborn had the Binding Coil of Bahamut, Heavensward had Alexander, and Stormblood has Omega. And it's a series of 3 tiers that have usually 4 fights apiece, that has some story along with it, and usually involves some fun bosses. In particular, Omega was pulling enemies from other dimensions, other worlds, and in this case they were pulling them from other Final Fantasies. So like the previous tier was a Final Fantasy VI themed tier, so you had Kefka and whatnot. But there are 2 versions of all of these fights, and there's the story mode that is easier, and so that everyone who wants to see the story can get through it. And then there's the...
I can hear your air quotes.
Yeah. I did actually do that. You're not... yeah. I mean, it's not really like... They are literally very easy, much easier than the Savage versions of the fights, and that's what people who are raiding in a static like I have, that's what they do. Every tier is they go through the Savage fights, and they are savage. They are very difficult. They require a lot of time and practice to get through, and we're still working on clearing the last fight in this final tier. It's taken a while for my group to get there. So
is it essentially you keep playing until a certain point, or you just keep playing until you all drop and you're like, well, all right, let's go back to the drawing board, figure out what went wrong, and see how much further we can progress the next time?
So statics usually have set raid times, so they'll go for a couple hours on a few days a week, and they don't usually go beyond that, unless you're like right at the end of a fight and you feel like you can the next attempt will be the clear.
Oh, okay. So it's mostly just playing up until a certain point for that, within the time frame of that evening, whether success or failure happens.
Yeah. Which can
and
be...
failure doesn't set you back too far?
I mean, each fight is it's its own instance. You don't you don't have to redo. Well, okay, I take that back. You have to, until they unlock the tier, you have to do the previous fights, or someone has to pull you into a later fight if you want to do that. And I guess to explain that, until they unlock the content, your progress resets every week on Tuesday mornings. So if there are 4 fights in the tier and you only clear the first 3 and you don't get to the 4th fight, when you get to that next reset, that next week, you have to do the first 3 fights again to try and get to the 4th one, unless somebody who's already been to that last fight can pull you in and then you skip ahead.
Gotcha.
But they're about to unlock, I don't know if it's going to happen with the patch that's coming next week or if it's going to be in April, but they're about to, I'm sure, unlock the last tier so that you can skip ahead without needing to do the previous fights. And so you can also farm the fights as many times as you want to get all the drops you need.
And is that the reason why they don't unlock it initially? Is just to kind of reduce people's ability to just farm it for the best equipment and basically have no end game until the next release?
Yeah, they try to pace things for people so that they don't burn through all of the new content immediately and then have nothing to do. Because, that's part of the game is the grind to gear up your characters, and it wouldn't really be much of a grind, and it wouldn't really require you to spend a lot of time in the game and maintain your sub if you could just, skip ahead immediately and just farm out a fight and be done with it.
Yeah, and then just resub or whatever once the next thing drops.
Yeah, and there are people that do that, but they're generally not people that are raiding, at least not doing the current raids.
No. And again, are you doing those for specific gear? Is that why or are you just doing it for the bragging rights of we did the raid?
It's both. I mean, all of us that do this kind of, it's partly about the achievement of getting through a tough fight, finishing it, mastering it, and clearing it. And then it also is about getting the gear, because the gearing system is you have 2 options to gear up, one of which requires that you grind for tomes, which you can only get a certain amount of every week, so it limits how much you can buy. And then the fights themselves also drop gear that is high level. And depending on what stats you want for your characters, you'll have a mix of both types of gear. So it's as much about progressing through the fight and actually just, performing on the fight and getting the fight down as it is clearing the fight so that you can get gear or upgrade items so that you can then, upgrade your character and hopefully make future attempts easier.
Which makes sense. What piece of gear are you coveting the most right now, Caitlin?
Well, we're on the last fight of the tier, and that fight always drops weapons and chess pieces for characters. And I need both of them for my best in slot this time. So the weapon is almost always a given. You almost always want the weapon from the Savage tier over the tome weapon. Chess pieces maybe a little bit more, give or take. This time I just need the stats from both of them. So
what main is your class again?
I main White Mage.
Right. So you're looking for wisdom?
Or
mind? I forget what it goes by.
Mind. Well, the mind is I can't really get better stats. You can usually never get better main stats no matter what equipment you're using, because that's always on every piece of equipment, and it's usually the cap for what you can have for that stat. So it's about substats, and my priority is almost always a high crit build. The meta right now for healers in Final Fantasy XIV is pretty much within reason. Try to get as much crit as you can, at least until you hit a stat cap that you want, and then fill out with things like determination and spell speed. So my priority is usually as much crit as I can without super duper sacrificing my det or my spell speed, or in some cases my piety, because unfortunately the gear that has the highest crit this tier also is kind of stingy with piety, so I had to balance things a little bit.
I wonder if that has to do with the Shadowbringer stuff. Is there kind of a lead into that?
Oh, no, I don't. It's not. I don't think it's related.
Just coincidence.
No, I mean, yeah, it's just they come up, they have different sort of, options every tier with regard to gear. And sometimes it's perfect for the build that you want, and sometimes it's kind of shitty and you have to make adjustments and take a piece that maybe you otherwise wouldn't want for the stats, just in order to not drop so far in a different stat.
Gotcha. For the critting, does that benefit, I guess, your healing, like so you can get crits on your heals, or how aggressive are you as a white mage?
So crit can go both ways. It can crit heals, but it can also mean crit for DPS, for damage. And I'm by no means one of the most aggressive healers out there that does orange parse level DPS while not letting people die, but I do try to DPS as much as I can, as much as I feel comfortable with the fight. And crit helps for both of those. I certainly like seeing crits when they're coming at an opportune time. The risk with crits and heals is that you run the risk of having a crit heal when you don't actually need the extra healing power, and that just is, at that point your question is, well, should I have used a different substat, or am I making things more difficult for the tanks by having these huge mega heals and drawing more hate and whatnot? But usually I think the way the community's fallen is that the benefits of critting when it's necessary, when that extra healing would actually save someone or make a particular damage output easier for the raid to get through. And of course, the benefits of critting when you're DPSing kind of usually outweigh the potential, the overhealing risk. Or that's my understanding anyway, of the meta for healers.
It's so strange to hear that too much healing could be a bad thing, but I'm guessing there's a higher meta to
Overheal is a thing, because on the one hand, if you're overhealing a lot, then you could be spending probably casts DPSing instead, which helps the fight go by faster and helps you pass DPS checks. And then, all healing pretty much generates hate, which the tanks have to worry about, and the healers themselves have to worry about. And sometimes crit can factor into that and make it more difficult. White mage already has hate problems because big, powerful AoE heals and HOTS that take over time. So, which they said that they reduced the enmity generation for pretty much everything that white mage does, at least their GCD heals with the previous patch. I don't know that I've really noticed it having a significant difference in my hate generation, but that's compounded by the fact that the tank strategy is and has been for quite some time is to skirt the line between survivability and DPS. So tanks will often run as much of a fight as they can out of tank stance in order to maximize DPS, which of course means that they will generate less enmity, which means that I will take more enmity and have to balance it that way. So it's,
there's a complex science to it all.
There
often
is.
Does sounds like there is.
For the high end stuff, I will say that all of this talk, this is purely about end game rating. So extreme fights, the savage fights. I haven't even touched the ultimate fights, but those are even more, obviously, more difficult and would require higher tuning of gear and player skill and strategies and whatnot. So if anyone has been checking out the game lately because of Scott streaming, or they got the starter pack from Twitch or whatnot, and if this is scaring anybody, don't be scared. You don't have to do any of this. I think the game is great without it. And if you do get into it, this right now sounds like I'm like talking up in the stratosphere, but if you're interested in raiding,
for people like me, yes.
if you're interested in raiding, just ease into it, do some of the old raids, find a static, learn as you go. I wasn't the healer that I am now when I started. I was very, very, very nervous, didn't really know a whole lot because I hadn't really healed high level content before. I very much did not like the DPS at all when I first started healing in raids, because I was so scared that I would let people die. And that was also back during the time when cleric stance was stupid, because it was a toggle between your healing power and your DPS power, which always made me nervous. I was afraid if I activated Cleric Stance at DPS, then somebody would get near critical health and I would have to wait like 5-10 seconds to switch back. But it's, as with everything else in games and MMOs in general, it's a gradual acclimatization process.
Yeah, and you'll get out of it what you want to put into it, really.
Yeah.
Well, all that crazy meta science of Final Fantasy XIV aside, you were also talking earlier God of War. You've ripped through finally.
Yeah, I finished the main story for God of War. I have a few things left to do, side quests, endgame kind of post game stuff left to do, but I beat the main story. Oh my! It's a very, very good game. You're playing a good game when you're getting close to the end, either because of the way the story's ramping up or because you've like looked to see people telling you like about how many hours do I have left. It's a good game when you get to that point and you're kind of sad, like you don't want the journey to be over because it's been so much fun.
I get that.
And I want to dive back in and do a New Game Plus, but I don't think I'm going to have the free time for a while, so it's going to have to wait. But it was a great ride from start to finish, and I've said this twice now, but this is like, I'm now a God of War fan again because of this, and I hope that they will. I can't imagine that they're not going to continue this. I think the success of the game critically and financially is such that there's definitely going to be a sequel. So, and there's plenty of material left for them to explore if they want to. There was a cliffhanger at the very end of the game, which seemed, they knew when they were doing this that they were going to lead into something else. So
there's more on the horizon for old man Kratos?
Yeah. Well, maybe.
Or do you think the son might take over? I don't know. I haven't played the story, so I don't know.
I think the son will take over. I think Atreus will eventually be the player character. I don't know if it's going to be in the next game or a hypothetical third game. There are story reasons why I'm saying this, which I won't spoil because it's very much at the end of the game.
Respect that.
But it also kind of seems like the whole underlying story between Kratos and Atreus is beyond like Atreus learning who his father is and bonding with his dad and whatnot. It's also about getting Atreus ready to survive in this harsh world that is much like in the original trilogy where the gods were basically all dicks. The Norse gods are basically all dicks with one or two exceptions. So it's as much about getting Atreus ready to deal with that, possibly with or without Kratos, as it is about like their own personal relationship as father and son. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if Atreus becomes the player character down the line.
All this good talk from yourself and many others now, I'm just like, I'm probably going to end up buying this game sometime, in the next year or two, to probably when it comes on discount or something to go back to, because just too much good has been said about it that is giving me faith in wanting to try the series out for myself. So
you should. And I was thinking about this. I was trying to think about how I sat on this because it's a continuation of the character and the story. It's not really a reboot in the sense that it doesn't start the history over again, but a lot of the game doesn't really require that you have deep knowledge of the events of the previous trilogy.
Oh, thank goodness.
Like, I mean, Kratos' past gets brought up, and there are some things that, you might miss if you didn't play, but, I mean, the vast majority of the game is about what they're doing right now and all that. So, on the one hand, I don't think it would be necessarily difficult or weird for someone to play this game without having played the original trilogy. On the other hand, a major part of the story is about Kratos somehow helping his son to become better than he was. And that sort of looming past of his, the man that he was, the things that he did, it's all sort of, hanging over everything that happens in the game. At least it is for a player that knows those events. And to a certain extent, I think some of the weight of what happens in the game has weight because the player, at least in my case, I played through the original trilogy. So I knew what happened. I knew exactly what Kratos did. I knew what a horrible monster he was and had become, not necessarily, entirely of his own volition, because the gods were totally messing with him throughout all 3 games, but still, that made some of the plot moments more impactful. So, on the other hand, I kind of want to say if you haven't played the original trilogy, maybe you should, but at the same time, I got so turned off by God of War 3 in particular that I kind of don't want to send people and say, hey, play through these really gory, really violent games where the main character shows little to no remorse and is basically a jackass dealing with other jackasses who happen to be bigger jackasses than him most of the time, but still doesn't really excuse the crap that he does, just so that you can have the full context for this reboot/sequel to have the story beats have a bit more of an impact. I mean, it's a weird thing where I both want to say, if you haven't played the first 3 games, you might want to play them, or spoil yourself with a plot summary first.
Well, I was going to say, there's even walkthroughs at this point, and then you can skip past parts that you're like, I don't need to see this.
Yeah, that might be the sort of the happy medium, is to just watch a Let's Play, or to watch, I'm sure they have videos that are just a combination of all the cutscenes from the previous games that you could watch, and that would get you by.
Just why haven't we gotten, Kingdom Hearts gets the story so far, why don't they have one for God of War? And it's basically just going to be like epic voice with guitar and be like, boobs, blood, Kratos is mad, screw the gods, and then that's about it.
Those videos were so good.
I'm sure they're... I remember even like for Final Fantasy VII Advent Children, there was like a story so far, a little video that it was so funny to have this like compilation of cutscenes and gameplay with like the old PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy VII models, and then you go and watch this gorgeous film afterwards to kind of follow up to this, like, really the story, just to get you caught up. It was a weird juxtaposition of the styles, just to make sure people understood what was happening in this bonkers film that I do love for what it is. But that's cool, and yeah, hopefully we'll get some more God of War with this kind of lineage that they've definitely brought back to life. I don't think the studio's done anything in bad faith for its fan base, so you're likely right to assume there'll be more.
I hope so. I want more.
So yeah, speaking of bringing things back, Final Fantasy IX finally made its way to the Xbox One and the Switch, back on that Nintendo Direct, which I'm blanking on the date, meant to look that up. It was March 5th, is that right?
That sounds very possibly right.
Yeah, maybe. I'm sure someone will correct me on it. But either way, Final Fantasy IX came out on the Switch, and I jumped at the opportunity to go back into it and play it for RPG Fan. I played through it many years after its release, back on the PS1, though. Did you ever do Final Fantasy IX?
Oh, yeah. PS1, baby.
Did you get it, like, basically right around launch, or was it, again, one that you came too late?
Pretty sure I played it when it came out. Yeah. I think I would have had to.
Why would you have had to? Were you like craving more Final Fantasy by that point?
I don't know how to really answer that question other than that when it came out I was in high school and I didn't have the means.
Didn't have money?
Didn't have yeah, so I mean, like, if I wanted to play something, I had to try and get it and play it then, because it wasn't like I was going to have the disposable income to go back and buy backlog games on top of new releases. And I'm pretty sure I was just super hyped for it, because that was like, Final Fantasy VII was my first Final Fantasy, and I loved that. Didn't like 8 so much, but I was still very much in that kind of, oh my god, I love Final Fantasy, oh my god, I love Square Soft at the time. I was very in love with the whole series. So, like, being able to experience a new Final Fantasy day one or, around release was, like, super, like, I was going to totally be a part of that.
Well, yeah, because especially if you had bounced off of 8, you then really didn't have a Final Fantasy since 97, so you're waiting 3 years for that.
Yeah, and 7 was out
jonesing for more.
when I discovered it. It was already available, so I didn't get in on that whole pre-release hype kind of thing. I don't remember if I...
You just kind of stumbled into it.
Yeah. Oh, what was it? It was a demo disc that I got with my PS1, I think. And it was like the opening bombing mission. And I was like, this is cool. So I had to have it. I don't remember if I was following a lot of 8. I was, of course, perusing things, the gaming magazines and whatnot, because back then that was how we all got our gaming news.
Pretty much.
But I don't remember if I was super following 8 or if it wasn't until 9 that I started kind of, keeping up on pre-release hype. But I'm sure that factored into it too, was, hearing all the good things about this game. So yeah. So I played it when it was current, I guess you'd say.
Gotcha.
And then almost pretty much never again. I don't think I've actually gone through the entire game since my first playthrough.
Well, it's like a good book, and if you get back to it, you get back to it, but at least it's always there.
It's a long, good book. Like, when I was tempted to replay it, we didn't even have the PC port yet, so there was no fast-forwarding anything. And I think I tried once to replay it, but got really bogged down by how slow the battle system is when you're playing it vanilla.
Yeah, those opening animations and the trance animations, all that sort of stuff just really starts to take its toll.
All of it is slow.
It slows things down.
The opening's slow as crap, but it's like everything in that battle system, just between doing basic attacks seems to take forever if you play it without any speed boost.
Yeah, because I felt it was endemic of the era. I brought this up once on the podcast before, too, that back with the PlayStation and the advent of 3D animation and graphics and such, developers were just kind of running with that. Now that they had more space, more time to play with, more flash to play with, they were purposely making things take a little longer and be a lot flashier, and sometimes to our detriment as gamers.
I think they also might have been getting a little too interested in, I want to say, I'm not sure how to express it, making things cinematic, like making the whole experience cinematic, because
just capturing the cinematography of it all.
Yeah, we were used to beautiful FMVs by that point already, but you saw every successive Final Fantasy tried harder and harder to make the non-FMVs, FMV parts of the game look nice,
like the gameplay cutscenes.
Yeah, and I wonder if maybe they just kind of went a little bit too far with 9 as a vanilla experience.
Yeah, it was near the end of the life cycle. They were trying to push everything.
Yeah, like as far as to actually inject it into the battle sequences itself, as opposed to just story cutscenes. So
yeah, exactly. I also wonder how close 9 came to at any point, if it was ever going to get switched over to the PS2 or if it was so far over in development, because the PS2
was right around there since 10 was a PS2 release.
Yeah, March 2000 is when the PlayStation 2 came out. So as you were saying about 10
came out in 2001, I want to say.
Yeah, so there probably was talks at some point of potentially switching it over. I mean, it was a 6-year life cycle. This was at the very end of it. It would have cut it close, and it would have been really interesting to see what it could have become had it been a PlayStation 2 title instead of PlayStation 1. But 10 definitely also is very cinematic, I found, as well.
Yeah, but in a way that worked much better in 10.
Yeah, if anything, 9 may have helped them kind of iron out some of those kinks
that
they kind of were learning. Through 7, 8, and 9, you could see them in various ways exploring more cinematic storytelling. That's what I also marveled at, even with like the front mission games as well that Square was developing. Like, yeah, the FMVs were always very cinematic, but definitely it was few and far between the cutscenes in any games were with in-game models and stuff were that cinematic. So yeah, maybe they're just kind of testing the waters for a new generation and a more powerful system that would let them get away with a lot of this stuff more seamlessly. As for myself, like I said, it took me a while before I ever got around to playing it. I think my best friend's brother got a PlayStation 2 and had sold me his PlayStation, and really quickly I bought Final Fantasy VII, which would have been almost like 7 years after it came out, and I finally was able to play it for myself for the first time. I highly enjoyed that experience, and then I think I picked up 8, bounced off it, and then I eventually got 9 as a gift, but it wasn't like years until I finally got around to playing it for whatever reason, just, again, backlog reasons. I had stuff to play, other things to do, life to go through, university to succeed at. Priorities.
Yes.
9 was pretty great. I just have a lot of fond memories from it that stuck with me, just as any of those 3 games did. And I don't know, I find like the discussion has always been pretty divisive as to which one of those 3 people like the most. Obviously, everyone is a huge fan of 7, and I feel like 9 kind of gets overshadowed a bit.
Yeah.
And again, how much of that is just because it was the first one of that generation? I don't know. But personally, I think, 9 lands really well, even though it is a very safe Final Fantasy, because they were kind of going back to the roots after having kind of done something similar to what we just saw with 15, where they have gone far left of field with the setting from what you would typically expect of a fantasy game, and then kind of slowly brought it back. So as we've hypothesized, maybe 16 will be a lot more of that rudimentary fantasy that we know the original series to be for, just because with how 15 was critically panned in many ways, they might be looking for a safe bet on the next one.
Mm-hmm. I mean, y'all know how I feel on that, so I don't have
I think
to.
we've got that
I don't
from
really
now
have
on.
to
If
say
anyone's
anything,
been
do
listening
I?
to the podcast, they know. But with 9, it was clearly, again, they just wanted to kind of go back to that traditional thing to round out that trilogy, for lack of a better term. And it does that really well. Like, it plays like a better Final Fantasy 1 in many ways, or for, that first generation that was all very much rooted in the fantasy element. And even with its, like, medieval-ish inspired soundtrack and the aesthetic of it all, like, it's got airships and stuff like that, which we've always had in the series, and a little bit of steampunkiness to it, but more in the Victorian sense, not so much the cyberpunk way that 7 went with it. And it's just such a magical world. It's just so delightful to run around such a vibrant, colorful collection of set pieces and stuff. That being said, the overworld, I forgot how bland it kind of looks. I mean, it's just because there's so much of the mist, but it's just kind of
the mist, yeah. Which was like, I guess, it is the mist continent, so there should be mist. But I also remember thinking at the time, and whenever I look back on screenshots, like, did they really want it to be the mist continent, or did they just call it that because graphical limitations being what they were, it was going to have mist.
Yeah, that short draw distance and everything.
Yeah.
But it just felt like, I seem to remember, at least with 8 and 7, like, just the world maps, they were they're possibly more smaller maps. I don't know the hard facts on that, but I just found them both to be much more memorable and interesting. And you could even argue some of the ones from the SNES games are very interesting, and especially like 6 has both of its world maps are polarizing in a way, like you can remember specific things about them, but this one, just kind of running around in between like Lindblom and the valley underneath it, like it just kind of felt there's a forest and some grass and some mountain ranges and then a very close draw distance, so it just felt very suffocating. And then you finally get to the continent where there is no mist, so the draw distance is bigger, but again, there's not really a lot to look at that really sets the landscape apart. It's just that seems to be the one area where they kind of phoned it in, for lack of a better term. And
like all of the design kind of went into the actual areas with the pre-rendered backgrounds, those are great.
Even though they do look really sad when paired up next to the HD models now.
Yeah, that you can see it in the screenshots even. It's like, kind of like you can't help but notice the fuzz.
Exactly, and it just seems bizarre that I don't know what the limitations of why they couldn't clean those up as well. I'm like, if you can go back and do the FMVs, which in my mind sounds like a more complicated process, why couldn't you do it for the backgrounds?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they had the original assets, right? I mean,
yeah, I don't think it was a question of them being lost or anything. So I'm wondering if it was budget, if it was time saving. I'm not sure what the deal was.
Yeah, maybe it would have been so much more work for them to do. I mean,
yeah, exactly. They're trying to get it for a specific release date. Maybe it just would have made it too clunky frame rate wise. Like, I don't know. But you figure at this day and age, it wouldn't have been an issue.
Oh, well, yeah, especially on Switch. I was going to say on PC that would not be a concern, but on Switch.
Yeah, which on the Switch, the only big issues I found were technically was just there was a slowdown on the overworld map, which I found was weird. Because again, I would think technology these days it would be able to pump that out no problem. If it's a PlayStation game with some slightly upres textures, you would figure there wouldn't be any big frame rate drops. But when you go to the overworld map, whether you're in handheld or docked, there's a frame rate drop. When you speed up the game, it goes away, of course, and plays as fluidly as everything else. But it just seemed weird that's where there was like such a weird slowdown.
I forget, is 7 already on Switch, or has that not come out yet?
No, it hasn't come out yet for one reason or another. I'm not sure why they did 9 first.
Okay. Because it would be interesting to see when it comes out if there's also problems with the overworld, or if it's something specific to 9.
Yeah, and I can't remember from my playthrough back when, like, I'm wondering if it's just part of the architecture that it's just like that. Like, it has an intentional slowdown that's just built into the programming to save on, like, the punishment that it would have had on the PlayStation back in the day or whatnot. And it's just inherently there, and they just didn't take it out. I've heard of those sort of things being in there, so maybe it's just a limiter. I'm not sure.
Let's see, 7's actually coming out next week.
Well, hopefully one of us will jump on that. I will, maybe. I don't know if I'm done with Left Alive, and it's done with me. But
is it ever done with you? Really?
We'll find out. We'll get to that. And then, yeah, the other slowdown was there. Again, I'm playing it off of a micro SD, which I mentioned in my review, but I still found like some of the load times into battles were really weirdly long, and that's not even like with the whole startup animations and stuff, which you can turn off. Like, it just seemed to take an especially long time when you first booted up the game as well and got into your first random encounter. It just, you just chugged through that loading black screen for a weirdly long time. But then I found everything else was pretty standard, so I just don't know what it is about the battle system and the engine of what it's loading up, why there's so much for it to process, but it really takes its time.
I don't remember, does Switch let you transfer data between the micro SD and the built-in storage?
I remember looking it up back when I first got my micro SD. I forget how it does it. Like, it installs it to your hard drive first if there's space, and if not, then it'll bump it over to the SD. But I think the saves are stored on the hard drive.
Well, I just mean, could you delete the game, not the saves, but the game itself from a micro SD and install it instead on the built-in storage and see if there's a difference?
I probably could do that, yes. If I took whatever was off of my built-in storage, I could definitely do that for sure. There's no way to transfer it, which is a weird clunky process of the Switch right now with data transfer and whatnot. The only way to do that is to literally delete the file and reinstall it from the Nintendo store.
So unfortunately, it's nothing new for Nintendo.
Yeah, 2 steps forward, 1 step backwards.
1 step back, yeah.
But anyways, all that aside, the game's, it's such a delightful thing to return to. Just all the magic was there, which my review says as much of. And I just was happy to have a reason to play this game again. Like you were saying with your own experience, how you haven't gone back to it, I've also wanted to go back to it at some point as well, but there's just too much else that has demanded my attention. I still have my PlayStation copy, fully want to go through it again because I love it. Yeah, I have the entire original lineup on my PlayStation. That's what Gwen and I are playing Chrono Trigger on, is Chronicles.
Oh.
I think it was the one that was Final Fantasy IV and Chrono Trigger. Either way, that's the one we're playing it on. So yeah, I've got my whole original set in my PlayStation to play it on. It's just just time. So when the offer came up, I was like, this is a good excuse to get back into it, and having these new quality of life adjustments just makes the game that much better. So if anyone is on the fence about going back to an older RPG and has the experiences that you said you had with Final Fantasy IX when you tried it up again, this is definitely the way to play it. Not only because you now have it on the Switch and it's on the go on a much nicer screen than, say, like Android or iOS. The fact that if you want to dock it and play it on TV, it's interchangeable, makes it like the best version as well. And you can just cater to however you want to play. Like, as you are of this audience, we've grown up, we've got jobs, we've got places to go, things to do, and grinding through a game isn't always, the best use of our time. So when a game presents you with a way to either do away with grinding completely because you just want to go through the story, as this does with all the different boosters that are installed now, or if you do want to do the grinding, but you want to put it on fast forward, give yourself a boost in battle so that way you can just kill everything, like turning on the 99999 booster, which makes every single hit, even with like Vivi and his little rods, everything he's hitting is doing that much damage. So if you just want to rip through stuff, if only to earn the skills or experience relatively vanilla, it just makes the experience that much quicker for people who want to play it a little more purely, so to speak. And that's an important part for me, because I still want to be a purist about it and feel like I earned a lot of these things, so I want to put the work in, but I also don't want to be sitting there grinding for hours on end and be like, okay, well, I just played through how much of this game, and how much of that was me just sitting there like repeatedly pressing this button to get through a battle, when I could have cut that time probably in half or by a third. So may as well just do it that way. And Gwen wants to pick it up and play it the complete pure version and experience it with the time that a child has. she can do that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's great that it still offers that original version as well as all these updates that you can run through the game so much easier with. Speaking of, to you bringing up 14 earlier, we've seen Ramza come into Tactics. Do you ever think they'll bring any of like the 7, 8, or 9 kind of content to 14? Has there been any references, I guess, to any of those beyond like Alexander, which had a really great big show in Final Fantasy 9?
To the best of my knowledge, keeping in mind that I may be wrong because I'm trying to remember 3 different content expansions.
There's been a lot.
I don't remember anything major from 8. 7 hasn't necessarily had anything big outside of I think Cloud's classic soldier outfit is a design that you can use.
Oh, cool.
Squall's is as well. And I guess I'd take back what I said about 8. The new tank that's coming in Shadowbringers is called Gunbreaker. They use a gun blade.
Oh, okay. So it's something loosely.
That's kind of a Final Fantasy 8 reference.
Yeah.
There's the Fenrir bike from Advent Children is a mount. You could get it by going to FanFest, but I also think they put it up on Mog Station afterwards. So one way or another, you can get that. There was a lot of there was a lot of speculation with the last raid tier, because every tier was Omega pulling from different worlds, aka different Final Fantasies.
Right.
There was speculation after the second tier was 6 themed that the last tier would be Final Fantasy 7, and it wasn't, and I think the 12 it wasn't, because as awesome as that would be for the fanboys to have, like the last fight be against Sephiroth, I really did not want that. That would just be so, like, people already complain to a certain extent about the fan service in the game, which I like for the most part, but I think that would have probably been a bit too far for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I feel it'd be more fitting to have, like, Genova or something. Like, have this calamity from another world collide with the Final Fantasy 14 world.
Which would make sense for 7, yeah. There have been a few things. There was a 24-man raid in Heavensward that was Final Fantasy 9 themed. It had a main theme that was basically pulled from Final Fantasy 9's main battle theme. You had some boss fights in there. There are little things here and there, like the clothing or a mount or, maybe a battle theme or whatnot. But nothing like Return to Ivalice in Stormblood, where we were literally sort of adapting and transplanting Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy 12 stories into Eorzea in Final Fantasy 14. Doesn't mean that they won't do something like that. We don't know what the theme of the raid is going to be in Shadowbringers. Hopefully they'll hint at that
Final
or
Fantasy
unveil
5.
it. Maybe.
that
I
was
feel
a
like that
heavy
wouldn't
sigh.
go over very well with people.
I just find, for myself, 5 is the most polarizing when regarding Blue Mages for me, because I think it's where I just first discovered them.
There's Japanese Fan Fest this weekend, so as of tomorrow and this weekend, we'll have some more details. So maybe we'll know what the raid is going to be. The Savage raid is going to be for Shadowbringers. Maybe it will be something like that. I think after Omega and the sort of the reference nature of Omega pulling from other Final Fantasies, I would like maybe a more original raid for 14, or at least, maybe a primal or a summon that's unexpected, something like that. But I guess we'll find out.
Yeah, no doubt.
They will definitely continue to do little nods like this back and forth. We already know that the 24-man is going to be penned by Yoko Taro. It's going to be a near themed 24-man raid, so you're probably not going to have Final Fantasy references in that per se, not from numbered Final Fantasies anyway.
No, but it would be interesting, to see if someday they just pull on that for endgame content again, because they've got so much to draw on in this franchise that they can keep doing their own original stuff with these odd nods back to past games, like they just did with Ivalice.
Yeah.
I don't know. As far as 9 goes, though, if I were to ever play through 14, I would definitely pick up Zidane's outfit if it was an option. I want those cufflinks, whatever they are.
That is an option, actually.
Oh, amazing.
His outfit is an option. It's one of the only ways right now that you can get jeans. If you want your character in jeans, his pants are basically like a jean-like material.
Oh, weird. I wouldn't have thought of them as genes to see them in the game. Like they're more like like a weird pantaloon
No,
bloomer
but
thing.
they
Or something.
definitely have that kind of look in 14.
How they adapted
so.
them, I guess. That's okay. I just want
Yeah,
his cufflinks that don't have sleeves, whatever they are, things.
Yeah, what's up with that? Like, what purpose does that serve? He I think subscribes to Beauregard / Merceray's philosophy from Critical Role of sleeves are bullshit, because he doesn't wear sleeves, but he does have, little cuffs.
I mean, you need something to accessorize with, right?
Yeah.
So, all that being said, Final Fantasy IX is definitely, I think, still a relevant game to play, and the Switch has just made it that much more accessible. So, if anyone has ever wanted to return to it, my review on the website says it in far more words, but it's definitely worth playing again, I found, and it was just a lot of fun to return to. As far as returning to things, Caitlin's gotten back into Edge of Eternity Chapter 2 because they passed that along for us to try out. What's your thoughts there?
My first thought is that this game's going to be huge. It's going to be a long game because this is Chapter 2, and they haven't roadmapped a huge amount of chapters. Now, that might change, and I hope it changes. But Chapter 2 it opens up a big new area. It's not like it's a totally different looking area, but it's a nice big expansive area that you get to basically right on the other side of where you end Chapter 1. But it's not a huge chapter with regard to like story content. So it does make me wonder, in the long run, how long is this story going to be? Because we haven't made a huge amount of progress with the main quest of the characters yet. We haven't even found the guy that they're looking for, which to me seemed like was going to be like the first step of their search to find a cure for this horrible disease called the corrosion. So like I'm just kind of find myself wondering, like, this could be meaty, and not that that's a bad thing. I'm just my only concern is based off what the developers have said in terms of the roadmap, and when they want the game to be like into beta and then full release, seems like there could be still a lot left to come unless future chapters are like gigantic. But so there are a number of improvements that have been added into this chapter. They pretty much they make small patches fairly often to like hot fixes and whatnot to correct bugs and to add in easier things that people ask for. And then they have larger patches that will be more technical in nature or will have lots of changes in them, or the ones that obviously introduce new story chapters. So, and some of them are like, quality of life things like being able to more easily gauge an enemy's strength relative to yours by different colors or icons to sort of indicate difficulty, things of that nature. One of the major additions is your first or possibly your only mount. I don't yet know. The UI has other slots, so I'm wondering if down the road we get different mounts as well.
Not just the cats, which are the only ones right now?
Right now it's the cats. They the Neckaroos is what they're called. And they're gigantic cats with like a two-forked tail or something like that, and nice long luxurious ears. They are adorable.
They look really swell. I just want to snuggle one.
Yes. Oh, they yeah, I would love to just totally sleep against one at night,
and pray it doesn't eat
at
me.
a camp. Yeah. You can pet them, by the way, which is like an important thing that all games that give you the option of seeing dogs and cats need to do. It is known that if you give me a dog or a cat in a game, I better be able to pet it.
Otherwise, 7 out of 10.
Yeah. So you can pet them, and they love you when you pet them, and of course you ride them, and they're fun to ride.
Is there some sort of bonding system as similar to, say, like Breath of the Wild's relationship with the horses or anything, or the petting it's just arbitrary?
The petting, as of right now, is just a thing free to do, which I'm happy.
It's satisfying.
Gave me the option to pet my giant cat mount. But no, there's no affection level. You can't feed them things and have them like trust you more or go faster or whatnot. The Nekarus do give you the option to do little hunting diversions. They'll pick up on a scent and sort of give you a direction to head in, and you have to sort of like follow the direction that the icon is showing you. And then when you get to wherever they smelled something, they'll dig something up, and it could be an enemy or it could be an item like a potion or piece of gear or something like that.
That'd be really neat for like quests if you had to like hunt down a person from like a fabric of their cloth of their or something or whatever, right?
Actually, there are side quests and a main story quest that has you do that.
Oh, cool. I'm glad they implemented that beyond just a gimmicky side quest game thing, so to speak.
Yeah. It is kind of like, it's not perfect. It feels like your Nekaru will hone in on something that is half a mile away, and you'll go along this meandering path, possibly running into enemies, which, by the way, you still get into enemy encounters when you're mounted, which I kind of wish you didn't. Otherwise, the only real benefit is a slightly faster... You move faster with a Nekaru, but like it's not like, holy crap, I'm just flying across this plane. So there's that, and I mean that's something that they can tweak with future updates.
I can't remember the combat. Is it turn-based or is it more kind of like Xenoblade?
It's turn-based.
So do the Nekaru become a character in the battle then?
No, they are not
so you
present
hop down.
for fights. Yeah. You
That's
actually don't even
unfortunate.
leave your mount. Like you'll go into combat automatically, and when you're done, you're still on your Nekaru, which I guess is nice because it would kind of suck if you had to keep remounting your mount.
It just seems odd that they're just like, wait, we got to get down, we got to fight, because these things can't. We all want to spare the cat, right?
Yeah, so you still have to, if you don't want to get into fights, you still have to move around enemies even when you're mounted. And it would have been nice if a bonus of being mounted is that enemies don't really want to deal with you because you're on a giant cute cat, and who would want to attack a giant cute cat?
Yeah, or if you could just like swipe them out of the way or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. This is not Witcher 3, though. So, which is to say that Witcher 3 had mostly awkward mounted combat that was sometimes not worth even attempting. But I digress. There seemed to me to be a performance hit with this patch. Now, whether that's because of the game or because in the interim between chapters I've updated my drivers. Sometimes running the most updated driver, doesn't lead to the best performance for different games. I haven't gone back and rolled back my drivers to see how much of an effect that has.
And this game's still in early access, right?
It's still in early access, so it's not like it's supposed to be fully optimized or anything. But there was a noticeable frame rate hit for me from first chapter to second chapter. They are working on a GPU performance patch that should come out in a few weeks. So I'm holding off on writing up my thoughts for the site until we get that patch so that I can see what that does for performance. I don't want to necessarily say in a preview that, oh, well, I had a 10 plus FPS drop after this patch, if an upcoming GPU patch is going to address that.
Yeah, if they're aware of it and plan to fix it, then may as well give them that chance to remedy the situation.
Yeah. And I mean, again, even if they don't, it's early access. It's not like I am expecting it to be running at super high frames per second, especially on my rig, which is not like super top of the line. So that aside, they introduced a new thing that you can do in the game if you don't want to just follow the main story. There is a lighthouse in the middle of this new area, which doesn't make any sense because I haven't seen an ocean or like a huge body of water, like a giant, I don't know why there's a lighthouse. It's in smack dab in the middle of a gigantic landlocked or mostly landlocked area, and I don't know. I didn't explore the edges of the entire area, but I'm not aware of there being like an ocean nearby per se, so it's kind of weird. But
well, it sounds like it's going to either be a really neat piece of lore in terms of, this lighthouse has some sort of magical purpose or was put there
from some sort of magical purpose, or maybe where you are used to be an ocean and now there's not.
Maybe. We don't know. But it's a lighthouse in the middle of a gigantic plain. And it's basically they're kind of going for like a semi-roguelike experience with this, where every time you go in, every floor is randomly generated. So no 2 floors are going to be the same, and every time you go in, it's going to be a different layout. And your goal is eventually to get up to the 100th floor, which you can't do at present. If I'm understanding things correctly, it only goes up to floor 10 right now. And with things like the enemies will get progressively more difficult as you go up floors. I'm not sure if there may be other elements to it and whatnot. And, if you die, the game does autosave when you enter a floor, so you're not like completely screwed out of your progress, but you get ejected from the dungeon, from the lighthouse, and then have to start again. Don't know yet whether or not there will be like places for you to like save or to start over again. That's not floor 1 if you have to leave or if you
like checkpoints
get KO'd. Yeah, because 100 floors all in one sitting could be really annoying, especially considering right now, as far as I can tell, enemies do not change how they aggro onto you based on levels. So you can be way over leveled for an enemy and they will still, as soon as they see you, run towards you, which means these floors are all fairly small corridors right now. It means you're probably going to be fighting almost every enemy on these floors as you try to find the access point to the next floor. So that could mean, if that remains the case, it could be a very long climb up to floor 100. And there is an energy system in the game that basically boosts your stats and whatnot that slowly decreases with every action that you take, and it would completely be gone by the time you get...
Yeah, you need somewhere to recharge that.
Yeah. They mentioned that they were going to add, randomly, there are going to be inns on every 10 floors. Don't know why there'd be an inn randomly in the middle of a tower like this, but you will be able to rest and regain your energy that way. So I'm wondering if they'll also maybe let you restart from every 10 floors too. So there's that. And it's another thing to do. There seems to be very little story connected to it. It's just like a quest, like, hey, this place kicked my butt, go check it out. And then it's, very little introduction. It's just climb these floors. But it's nice that they are thinking about other activities to give you in the game beyond the main quests, the various side quests, and gathering materials to craft things, which is another thing you can do in the game, which I don't think I mentioned in my preview of chapter 1, so that's a thing you can do. Other than that, like I said, it wasn't a very long chapter. It's probably roughly about half the length time-wise for me.
Does it keep you wanting more though?
I am still sufficiently interested in the quest. Beyond that though, my initial concerns was I'm just wondering how long of a story are they planning here, and if patch wise it's not going to be super long, I'm then kind of getting a little concerned about where the story's going to go, but can only really wait and see what comes next. So
that's fair enough. And do they have any indication as to when the next chapter is coming out? Have they offered that?
I don't believe they have. They don't have a specific... It's supposed to be every few months, so this would probably be sometime maybe late summer when I would probably expect the next story chapter. As we had the original chapter 1 was released in December, and we just got this chapter 2 weeks ago, I think it was, in March. So it's been roughly 4-ish months.
Yeah, so summer sounds about right then, as I estimate.
Yeah, right when all these other things are coming out.
Yeah, you'll have so much time to play it.
Yeah. Well, luckily, it's not like I'm playing the entire game from scratch every time.
That's fair.
A new chapter has come out. It's just a new chapter, so it doesn't take quite as much of time commitment.
Yeah.
Assuming that future chapters are roughly somewhere close to where they've been with the first 2, which is somewhere between 4 to 8 hours a piece.
Yeah, it doesn't sound too bad, I guess. It's a pretty truncated experience to get into the next thing. And I guess once all of the chapters roll out, then they're going to be trying to finish off the complete package and get it out of early release, I guess.
I think so, yeah. Once everything's content-wise is there, then we'll go into presumably a beta period and then full release, which should also include console releases, because right now it is only on PC.
Yes, that's right. I wonder if we'll get it on Switch.
I don't think it's right now in their plan, but everything is coming to Switch pretty much, so...
Wouldn't see why not.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like it's always good to have something on the go like this.
Yeah. I mean, hey, Microsoft is trying to get their games on Switch, so, I mean, like, anything's possible.
That's not wrong. Speaking of games that aren't on the Switch, Left Alive came out.
Ooh.
And yeah, I actually, you pretty much just quoted on my notes that I was going to talk about here, but first thing is oof. And yeah. Did you ever play Front Mission, Caitlin?
No, I have not. I've wanted to, but it's one of those things where I've been interested, but I guess not so interested that I was like, okay, I'm going to set time aside to play it. And also, there's how many games now in the series? I was always like, where do I even start?
I think there's 4 that we got. Oh, no, maybe 5, because there was also Front Mission Evolved, which I don't think did great. But that being said, we only got Front Mission 1 as an English port to the DS back in the day.
Oof.
And which was good. It was that we finally got it because, yeah, my first experience with Front Mission 1 was playing it as an emulator that was translated. So having it on the DS, they added some little bit of expanded story content and stuff. It was really neat to play. And if you can find it on the DS, I do recommend starting there. It's a good game. Plays kind of like Tactics Advance in a sense, for how it kind of looks sprite wise and such, but the tactics are cool. Customizing the mecha is cool. 3 was awesome on the PlayStation, and it had a really neat mini game where you got to like hack the internet through one of your characters because they had its own built-in like internet system and email system that was used for part of like the plot devices and stuff. And
cool.
Part of it had you trying to hack into various government websites to get information for some side stuff, if I recall correctly.
Oh, neat.
So I thought that was really neat, and it made you feel very, very, very sneaky and I don't know. I just felt very cool being a hacker, even though I clearly knew nothing about it, and the game was doing it for you. It was just very satisfying when you successfully like got into a database, figured out a password, and all that stuff. It was very neat. And 4 was kind of more of the same, but really neat. The engine was fantastic that it was built in for the PlayStation 2, and I just found it a really great game. I was always attracted to it from its concept art that just looked stunning, and then the gameplay itself was great, I remember. And then after that, it kind of trickled down.
Are they connected story-wise, though? Does one have to play the older games in order to enjoy the more recent ones?
As I recall, no. Like, there's some context. Like, they just kind of reference vaguely, like, the events of it, but it's always, like, back in the day, this happened, now here's the game. So you're not really missing out on... It's not like there's any characters that were important to the history of it that they reference directly in any of the games, as I recall. Each one's kind of its own standalone tale, much kind of like Final Fantasy, except it references the past, unlike Final Fantasy. So they're aware of the past happened, but the story itself doesn't depend on it in each of the games, if I recall correctly. 2, I don't think we ever got Front Mission 2 out here either. But I would definitely recommend 4 or 3 or 1 if you can track down any of those ones. And then there was, I want to say it's called Gun Hazard or something. It was like a weird, like, side-scrolling one.
That sounds like an awful title.
Well, it sounds, I guess, Japanese as heck when it comes to adding random English words to things. But yeah, there's a Front Mission Gun Hazard was like a side-scrolling role-playing shooter, and it feels like that's more what this is with Left Alive, because Left Alive takes place in the Front Mission universe, which had me very excited about it, because I was like, oh good, I get to get in my my Vonzer again, and I wasn't really looking at anything about the game until we got it, and I was like, oh, this is not a tactical game at all in any way, shape, or form. So that threw me for a second, and then the more I started playing it and realizing the game kind of feels like it's wanting you to play it like it's a Tomb Raider game, that you're a survivor in this war between these two countries that are fictitiously made up, that, as I recall, have nothing to do with the main series. And you're a survivor in the city just trying to escape the enemy occupation, which is neat. And you're trying to be stealthy and find things to craft with and secondhand weapons and stuff, all very similar to kind of how the new Tomb Raider series is played. Except it doesn't play nearly as fluidly or as nicely as those games. It's clunky, and the stealth system, like the AI is just, they see you for no apparent reason sometimes. Just the way, like they have really hard patterns to analyze, and part of that is they try to make the world feel very alive, which I respect. But with the changing patterns and everything, it can, really catch players off guard, and it punishes you for that failure. Like if you're getting shot, it doesn't take much for you to be paralyzed, I guess, more for lack of a better term, with the damage you're taking. And in switching around between healing items and traps and your grenades, there's so many different combinations of buttons that you're trying to remember to use, and the heat of it all, like you spend a lot of time fighting with the control scheme and how sluggish it all feels, that the fluid gameplay that it seems like they would want for this kind of game just kind of falls by the wayside.
Ugh, that's never a good thing. You shouldn't.
And exactly, that's the biggest problem, because I'm intrigued by the world. I'm intrigued by the conflict. I really like how, so far, I'm only in like 3 or 4 missions, and I think there's 12. It seems like they have some really cool opinions on how people deal with being in the war and as functioning as survivors and dealing with the stress of it all. Like, I enjoy what they're trying to build, but the moments in between these story takes are just so unnecessarily drawn out because you're constantly fighting against the game's clunkiness. So they had a lot of great ideas, but they just failed in the execution. And that makes me sad, because I worried now that this game is going to be like the death knell. Because as far as I know, Front Mission 5, Scars of the War, didn't do that great either. So I don't know how much more Front Mission we're going to get. And, I like that they were trying to mix things up by taking the game into a different context. And, you still get to pilot mechs now and again when you find one, and it feels more it feels more like you're playing Armored Core, sort of, but just a little sluggish, because these aren't streamlined for the rapid, quick movements like they were. They're more like just big walking tanks. So you're just kind of pointing and shooting at stuff. And
Are they wait, so they're slow, and is it just like a slow walking firing simulator kind of thing?
Pretty much. You can move in any direction you want and stuff. So you don't have to, the fights against other Vonzers basically boils down to what it more or less looks like in the strategy game, where you just point and shoot at each other. You can kind of strafe a bit, but it's not doing too much except kind of throwing off where they're exactly targeting, because when you are shooting at the enemy mecha, you can target like specifically legs and arms and stuff like that. Not necessarily, there's no locked hard targeting. I wasn't playing with aim assist, so I don't know if that factors in there, but you can at least, if you're aiming, you can aim at the arm and then knock out that weapon, so that way they can't use it against you, for example, or take out their legs so then they can't shift and move and get behind things anymore.
Okay.
But you're walking through city streets, so it's not like strafing, and there's no really big open places so far that I've found. I'm sure that'll change later on, like one of the characters, because right now it's bouncing between 2 characters, Mikhail and Olga. When you're playing as Olga, she's not a Vonzer pilot. She's just a local police officer who's kind of stuck in things. And you're trying to dodge Vonzers and stuff that are sitting out there on patrol, as well as like enemy drones and enemy troops. So it's in a big open area, and I imagine we'll get to fight in those open areas at some point again down the line, because I imagine this game will retread the small area in which it takes place. I've already gone back to different chapters with Mikhail and just been in a different part of the city, but you can go back and visit the parts you were at, where enemy troops have repositioned and stuff like that based on what's going on in the moment.
Did different characters have like different abilities or skills that allows you to like go back to a previous area and find something that you couldn't as another character?
Not so much. The difference in the characters is simply just their plot lines. The game, as far as its RPG elements goes, are very light. Like, it's more you're playing through an action narrative game.
Okay.
Because the stat changes, if you could call it that, because you have no stats as your character, but you can find armor around that you can pick up that eventually takes too much damage and breaks. You can find different weapons, which again melee weapons have a certain lifespan, which is frustrating.
Ugh,
So
God, I
after you
hate
whack someone with a
that.
shovel a certain amount of times, it breaks. And I get it, it's the whole survival aspect, but yeah, it's super frustrating. And weapons, the guns don't seem to break, but again, ammo is finite.
Ammo, yeah.
So that's fine. So the big difference you have between the two characters isn't so much skills or anything like that, because they both do the same things. They can both craft the same stuff. They both have access to the same inventory, but it's their own inventory. So the only difference you'll have is what you've shared amongst the characters. Like every save place, there's a little terminal that can heal you. I'm playing on standard setting, and I don't know if it changes from each one, but in the standard setting, it heals you a max of 3 times, and then it's expended. There's your little saving station that you can do an actual save file at, and because there's also checkpoints that it will save at, but those can definitely set you back if you die in an opportune moment. And then there's a little cache box where you can stash stuff, because the other part of the inventory system is you have a finite amount of stuff you can carry. You have a max weight limit, which does get expanded if you can find a backpack, but it's only so much. So like you can carry like 3,000 units or whatever it is, and a gun can take up a lot of that, and your armor can take up a lot of that and stuff like that. So
Yay.
so you can carry, so you can't just be hoarding a bunch of weapons, because you can only have 3 different things equipped at a time, and usually you'll want like a melee weapon if you can find one that isn't broken, and because it's quieter, whereas the guns you'll want when you're in a tight spot. And carrying around 6 different types of weapons just isn't possible because of the weight limits. Luckily, ammo doesn't take up any space, but then when you're crafting things like mines and remote control grenades and healing items and stuff like that, all those begin to add up in weight, and all the crafting materials begin to add up in weight as well. So you're constantly playing a management system with that, which can sometimes be tedious, but for the most part, the one fun part of the gameplay, again, is with all these traps and this survival aspect, is you tend to go through these things really quickly. The game doesn't entirely encourage you to hoard a lot, because you'll definitely get stuck in a lot of sticky situations where you're like, after trial and error, if you failed by just charging into it, or failed to take someone out stealthily because it's just there's too many enemies around to stumble upon you in action, you'll want to slowly narrow them down, thin them out with grenades or with traps that you lay when you start the combat kind of things. That way you can lure them into traps with you.
Do you feel like the game gives you enough resources to do what it asks you to do? Is it difficult in part because there's scarcity, or is it more so just, things don't work the way that you think that they should work?
Part of it is the latter. Yeah, there's things that just don't seem to work like I think they should work. Like, for example, shooting in the game is bizarre. It seems like because the whole game is third person, so it seems like when you focus to aim, as any game does, where you kind of basically are quote unquote looking down the sights, it seems to track the fire from your shoulder through the sights. So if something interrupts that space, like if you're trying to shoot around the corner, it'll hit the corner, even if the gun's ahead of the corner.
Oh yeah, I hate it when that happens.
Like, that's weird. And so there's that. There's the other aspect that, if you're moving around, the reticle gets bigger, which means your firing isn't going to be as accurate. But even when you're just standing stationary, it doesn't always feel like the aiming is very accurate, which is frustrating, especially since there's no aiming stat to speak of. So it kind of feels like a weird, clunky version of kind of what was going on in like Mass Effect 1, where it was kind of twitch, but kind of not. That's frustrating as well, because there's no way for you to augment that. The UI is a little hard to read because everything is in like a very vibrant, angry red
Yeah.
when you're highlighting it, and then the text on it is black. And then there's just so much information thrown at you that it's hard to remember everything. And I found one sniper rifle, but you can't reload those. They're basically a one-shot use.
What?
Yeah, you basically can shoot with however much ammo you have, and then once it's done, it's done. You can't rearm them because I guess it'd be too OP or whatever. I don't know.
Well, I don't like that.
Right? I like being sneaky and even
What kind of tactical shooter doesn't let you be a sniper?
Well, exactly, because they can punish you with the fact that they're loud, so it's gonna draw attention. But nope, they just choose to punish you that you get, however many rounds it comes with. The problem too is if you swap to any other gun, then it's just gone. It ceases to exist. So you can only use it while you have it,
which is another thing. So you can't store it for like the moment you need it.
This is for, like, every gun?
No, just the sniper rifle.
The sniper. Oh, God.
Yeah, like every other gun, you can cycle through as one of your 3 ones, but the sniper rifle comes as like a 4th one. But once you cycle off of it, you can't go back to it. It just ceases to exist. Like with anything.
Once you pick it up thinking, I might need this, and then you get into a situation where it's a detriment to have a sniper rifle versus a more close range weapon. You're screwed. You either have to use the weapon in an opportune moment or switch to a more conventional weapon
Basically.
and lose. Okay, that's awful.
Yeah,
That's really
it just
bad.
seems really silly. Like, I don't know why they made that design choice. Like, it basically makes it feel like a power-up that you have for, like, a limited time kind of thing, which, again, I get they're
It
trying
shouldn't
to...
be a sniper rifle. That should be like a rocket launcher or a grenade launcher. That
Right.
should be that.
Exactly, because that's very scarce ammo, for sure.
I mean, it's like sniper rifles can be powerful, but it's also can be really hard to be a good sniper.
Yeah.
And especially in a game like this where it sounds like the actual aiming of the game is sometimes fighting with you as opposed to, being a smooth experience.
Exactly, and then coupled with the survival aspect of it, that you're trying to do everything quietly. A big loud bang, because you're not going to... They can just make it so you never get a silent sniper rifle. It's going to draw attention.
Yeah.
And then the other thing about it is most games that have stealth, like Deus Ex or Lara Croft Tomb Raider games, the recent ones, you can stealth kill people. If you're rewarded with your patience in analyzing enemy patterns of sneaking up behind someone, that you can kill them. Not in this one. You sneak up behind someone with a pipe or a shovel or whatever, and you can target them, and then you can whack them. And then you gotta whack them again. And then you gotta whack them again. On the third one, they'll finally fall down. Then you can kind of do a coup de grace and kill them in a one shot, assuming your weapon isn't badly damaged. If your weapon's badly damaged, it won't one shot them.
Can you punch? Is there unarmed punching?
You can like pistol whip, but all it really does is just knock them off balance kind of thing for a second. Conversely, if they pistol whip you, it knocks you flying.
Oh, wow.
Which is
okay.
bizarre. And so you feel extremely helpless. Same thing happens, like if you're behind cover and you peek out, and if they're shooting at you and they start clipping you with their shots, it makes your character stand up out of cover.
What?
It breaks whatever the mechanic is to be locked against the cover, which is very frustrating. It catches you off guard, because then you're like, I'm getting pinned with bullet fire, and now I need to awkwardly try and get back behind my cover and then go back into ducking and then get myself against the cover.
This is like a fundamental function of a cover-based shooter is that doesn't happen.
Exactly. Like, I get you should be punished if you're sticking your head out the wrong time, but then, yeah, you should be able to whip yourself back under, not stun-locked out of it, so to speak.
You get punished by taking damage. You don't get punished by being staggered and thrown out of cover where you take more damage.
Yeah, and so it's like little things like that they didn't seem to take into account that just makes what otherwise should be a really neat stealth survival system in a really intriguing setting, makes it just not fun. And it's so unfortunate, because there's so many other games that you should just play instead that do this a lot more fun.
Well, that's super disappointing. 'cause
Exactly.
This game has been on my radar since it was first revealed, and we got that the art, because it was like, holy, Metal Gear,
Right?
But
And
this is really,
the game
this
looks
is
really
sad.
good. But yeah,
It does? Okay.
Yeah, the game looks pretty good. Like, it's the character models are really well done, really well animated. The dubbing is a little but it's easily to forgive, because the performances, I find, are pretty genuine. And I like, the drabness of the world. It's drab because it's a war-torn city, but they've still done it well. Everything looks really nice. The the weapon models and the enemy models, all that stuff's very neat. It's rare that I've seen any sort of weird glitchiness with laying out of the world and stuff like that. But it feels bleak, but still it's well done. So that's good. In the actual cutscenes themselves, again, the acting is fairly convincing, even if sometimes they make some odd story choices. I've had definitely like one enemy who kind of catches you off guard, like right in the first mission, and could just end the game right there, but for no explicable reason. So it's like, we'll continue this conversation later, and just leaves. And it's just like, the whole thing has been about the enemy finding your troops and just slaughtering them because they're trying to clean out the city. So one of them finds you and then chooses not to for story reasons.
I just discovered you, and I can kill you, but I'm feeling generous today, so you get to live.
Yeah, it's kind of standard like anime bad guy, whatever. But the one nice thing is neither of the bad guys so far that we've kind of run into with each character, neither of the story bad guys have been caught monologuing, which is
good.
nice. Then they'll go on like a diatribe about whatever it is on their mind, so to speak. But at one point, the character's just like, "What are you planning? What are you doing here?" They're like, "I'm not telling you that," and then they just move on. I'm like, "Okay, good. I'll give
I'm
you
not
that
falling
pass."
for that trick.
Kind of, right? Yeah, I'm not going to get you monologuing. And then that's what's also interesting is these story beats. You get to make choices in the moment.
Okay.
So sometimes it's just an A and B. Sometimes you get 4 different options. Sometimes it's 3. And it's essentially, you just reacting to what they say. And it does have an outcome that alters things down the line, as far as I'm told. Kind of, Walking Dead-ish, so to speak.
Ooh. Telltale?
Yeah, kind of Telltale-like. So, it'll affect things down the line, as I'm told, beyond just the immediate moment. Because it seems like, especially in that first encounter, when you get to the end of each mission, there's like a tally of all the stuff you kind of did and what your decisions kind of did in those moments. And one of the ones in that first one said, like, you survived that encounter. So I was like, oh, so based on some of my answers, he could have just outright shot me then. So clearly I did something to make him want to spare me. So
Okay.
that's kind of neat. And I like that that plays well and is really well integrated. And that's the small bit that makes you want to suffer through the terrible action gameplay to get to these really neat story beats where I kind of get to determine things. And the side quests in the world almost always involve a survivor, because that's the whole thing, right? They're all survivors and you're trying to find other survivor NPCs. And again, that system mostly seems good, but sometimes seems a little broken with how like their own little self-contained missions. For example, one NPC I found then triggered enemy AI that immediately knew where he was. So in the first one, that kind of made sense because his things was like, oh my gosh, they found me, was as soon as you talked to him. So you clearly fell into a trap. Whereas there was another one where was coming to his rescue, and you have to basically lead them, help them through the map to get to a certain place where the survivors can go into hiding, like a safe zone. Mm-hmm. So you have to try and lead them past enemy troops and such. But for some reason, as soon as, again, I activated this person, it spawned new troops that came right to the area where I talked to this person, even though there was no reason for it because I hadn't alerted anybody. He didn't do anything to alert anybody. He hadn't even moved yet. I had already cleared out any enemies that were in the path. So I was then locked in this like 30 minutes of reliving this horrible moment of trying to figure out how to get this person out alive or myself out alive without alerting all the additional troops that I had kind of left off to the side that I knew we could get around, because these 2 new troops that spawned were triggering a firefight which caught their attention. And I just kept getting stuck in a loop where either the survivor died or I died. Just because of this random programming thing of like, oh, they suddenly know where I am and they're going to run right to me. And it's just like, what? There was no reason for this. So those kind of things, again, get a little frustrating with how that all works out. And if you're going along, because you can tell them to stop or go when you deem it being safe as you're clearing things out. Again, another thing that can throw a wrench in things is as you're clearing enemies. I feel like it happens when you're taking too long, the enemies will catch on that they're losing troops in that area and redistribute and redeploy. So that can be problematic.
Oh, goody. So you could spend a whole bunch of time clearing out an area, to make it easier for yourself and, I don't know, to like feel accomplished. And then it's like, hey, redeploy.
Yeah, and then suddenly, they have what's called the heat map. So you look at your map and it shows these big areas of red where it's not a good idea to go into because enemy troop levels have gotten so intense there. And even your little system will alert you that the enemies are aware that you're here now and enemy incursions are bound to happen. So it's just like, well, at this point, how am I supposed to get these survivors through? Whether they're a combative survivor or non-combative, they almost always get paralyzed by the fact that they're being shot at and then just get gunned down. So it can be a really frustrating system, even though, again, it was well intended. And it's rewarding when you can get them through and save them. But other times you're just like, ugh. Even one time, actually, I was on my way to a side quest point where an NPC was waiting for me to find them and guide them to whatever. I hadn't started their quest yet. I just knew it was a quest marker for me to get to. And on the way there, I had done something with one or two of the enemies I was fighting that they decided to run off or leave. And I was like, oh, okay. But apparently they went off and saw the NPC that I hadn't found and killed them before I could get there.
Before you picked up the quest?
Exactly. Which I thought on the one hand, I was like, oh, well, thanks, game. But the other thing I was like, well, that's kind of neat, I guess. Like, they don't exist in a vacuum. So I thought that was kind of cool, but it was still frustrating that I was just like, oh, this quest has already failed before I could even begin it. Well, all right. So.
Especially because you didn't, like, do anything necessarily that you could tell that caused that directly. It's just that they just spontaneously decided to give up fighting you.
Yeah, like, I don't know if they just something triggered them to randomly go in this person's direction, if something I did caused the NPC to move, like if I caused an explosion or something. I don't know what it was. They just decided to redeploy or redistribute troops, and I guess somehow they ended up on the path of the NPC and gunned them down. And of course, since I wasn't protecting the NPC, nothing warned me that was happening because I hadn't met them, so the system hadn't registered them. Because you have this system called Koshka, which is basically, for lack of a better term, it's Navi or Fi. And almost it's almost as infuriating because it'll constantly, once you have it, there's no way to turn it off. Like if it'll constantly warn you that an enemy's approaching. So like if you're trying to sneak up on an enemy, every like 2 seconds they'll be like, the enemy is approaching. The enemy is approaching. The enemy is approaching. Like, I'm aware. What? I'm walking towards them. And obviously it doesn't tip them off, but it's just annoying to listen to that all the time.
Especially if you're like staring at the enemy like, I know. Also, they're not approaching. I'm moving towards them.
Exactly. And, you know, there's definitely, I won't discredit it. Like, there's been the odd time where that's caught my attention when, like, a drone has been coming up. I'm like, okay, cool. Thanks for the heads up. But I wish you could then, like, acknowledge it or something and then just have it not alert you at all for that enemy anymore or something.
Yeah.
Because then every time it comes near you or every time you're, like, skirting by, like, a Wanzer, it's just like, the enemy is approaching. And it's just like, yeah, I see the giant robot. Thanks. You know? And so that's just, it's almost as obnoxious as, like, your batteries are running low, master. So, as Fi was guilty of in Skyward Sword. So there's just a lot of weird little design elements in the actual action gameplay, as I was saying, that just really bogs the game down. But if you can get to the cool story moments, which also happened with some of the survivors, like I was talking to one survivor, I was trying to convince her to come with me, and I didn't say the right things with my options I was given, and she ended up shooting herself in the head by deciding there was nothing worth living for. And I was like, oh, well, all right, I failed that one. So, yeah, what you say matters, and even with these side quests, not just with the main overarching storyline. So I'm intrigued to see where my decisions take me as the missions progress. I just did a mission where the two protagonists have met, but they don't join forces. They just decide to go their separate ways again.
Oh, okay.
So they haven't done anything together yet except been like, oh, hey, we're both here and we're both surviving. We're on the same side. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to go do my thing. You do your thing. We'll maybe meet up again later. And I've met another character who starts giving you quests. He's a photojournalist who's basically behind enemy lines trying to get the scoop on the whole war thing and talk to the greater plot that is at play with why this war was started. Because it's all proxy wars in this world. There's no actual war in a grand scheme because of the way the global economy works now, but there's still proxy wars and stuff like that. So this is one of those. And this photojournalist seems to be able to play the game better than I am. Because he can get anywhere and do anything, and he's been following me around the whole time and so is aware of my actions. And I'm just like, how do I get like you? I want to be that sneaky. I want to be that good at this.
Maybe he's a Solid Snake in disguise, you know?
Right? Dashing, handsome, French, black, Solid Snake.
What name? Pliskin, right?
Oh, right, yeah.
His first name, but in
it's
Metal
been a
Gear
while
Solid
since I played.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of issues with the game. But if you can push through it, like I definitely recommend taking Square up on their offer of discounting it out the gate and playing it at a discount. You can find some really neat moments and, you know, you can appreciate what they were trying to go for, but at the same time, if you don't want to put it on the easiest setting and still suffer through this experience, like, it's something to pass, I think. But I'm gonna wait and reserve a complete judgment for the final end game, because maybe the story will ratchet it up to something that I really want to push through and see. So I still have a good half of the game to go through, and it's part of why I've been playing Breath of the Wild again, because I just wanted to play something fun.
And
A little bit of a palate cleanser.
yeah, I needed it because, yeah, you're just banging your head against the wall sometimes with it. So I apologize for anyone listening. It's a bit discouraging, a review of it so far. But like I said, there's opportunity. The story could turn it around, but it's been not getting great reviews, and I don't think those people are entirely wrong so far. So we shall see what comes out of it from me, because I tend to review a little more positively than the average Joe, so they could get a gimme from me. But we shall see. Yeah, so Left Alive. We'll see if I leave it alive after my review. Otherwise...
Or if it's dead walking.
Yeah, like it's got a lot of like little endgame content and stuff to find too, like these archives and, you know, trying to get all the survivors in a mission. Like it definitely offers you to replay each mission if you feel you want to make different choices or try things again. So there's a lot of replay value to it, and it's just a question of if I'll want to go back to it and try it. And I have it now, so I feel like it's something I might boot up again after I've completed it in a few years to be like, oh, let's try it again. You know, we'll see.
Hopefully they'll patch some things, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they might Square Enix might just say, this is awful, let's not devote more resources to it. But it sounds like there are some, at least relatively, like, not being a developer or programmer, I don't know, but I feel like some of the things that you've said could probably be patched, like, relatively simply compared to, you know, the entirety of the game.
Yeah, like I'm sure there's some mechanics they can futz with, or some details of like, yeah, how like the sniper rifle works, for example.
Yeah. Or like at the very least letting you mute that voice, maybe. Like,
Yes, please.
Let me turn it off. I mean, hey, since you have different difficulty levels, if turning it off on some level means a harder experience, why won't you let me have that? It could be a super duper challenge mode to like have no, you know, audio aid there.
Yeah, if you don't have that guide constantly pointing everything out to you, it would definitely make things more of a challenge, because yeah, you can't be looking everywhere at once, and sometimes a patrol changes and they just saunter up behind you and you're like, oh gosh. So I don't know, when I first got it, I was like, okay, cool, I see where like they get their information from, as a, you know, they have this onboard basically computer for every soldier to kind of analyze combat readiness and effectiveness and all that neat stuff, and oh gosh, it won't shut up. And I immediately went to the options to like try and find, like, can I turn it off? Can I turn off that voice? Can it? No? Oh, okay. So I have to live with this. All right, thanks, game.
AI was a mistake.
Exactly.
What have we done?
Exactly.
They won't shut up.
She just wants to be heard. I mean, it's a very nice voice. I don't begrudge the actor or anything that was done with it, but it's just, yeah, I've said it. It's Captain Obvious all the time.
Yeah.
Well, that's Left Alive, and if you give it a shot, let me know what you think. I'd be curious to see what other people think of it. It could be one of those unpopular game opinions that someone just really loves it, you know? There's definitely some stuff in there to appreciate, and we'll see if I'm willing to find it. So, we're coming to the end of the episode, but first of all, at the end of each episode, we usually say, hey, you can email us, and we tell you where to do that. And people actually have been doing it, which has been nice. Now that I'm on top of hosting the podcast, I get to check those emails, and we've gotten some on the past couple. Episode 159, we were written to by Jeremy, who was, well, first of all, he said it was a terrific episode and was really pleased with your take, Caitlin, on Octopath Traveler. It was his game of the year for 2018, so he's glad that you're really digging it.
Nice.
And
it's a great game.
I just did the review of the soundtrack. That went up this past week. It's all blur right now. But that just went up, and I was really happy with my review on that, kind of reapproaching the music again. I still haven't gotten the full context of it, but I guarantee that soundtrack just sounds so good when actually in-game, in context. You
got a Twitter mention from Nishiki, didn't you?
I did. And that made me so happy. I couldn't believe that I don't know if he read the whole review or just clocked that it exists. Either way, it's in his best interest, of course, to engage in the fan base and be aware of what people are saying about his work. But I'm happy to have him say it was a good review.
Yeah, seriously.
So that was really nice because yeah, I think he's got a really promising career. If Octopath Traveler's soundtrack is any indication, and if he's someone I start to follow with earnest, I'm happy he's aware I exist in some small facet. Like, he's doing some great stuff that feels very akin to what the quote unquote forefathers of RPG music have established from the Super Nintendo days and all the way up to the PlayStation and everything, and it sounds so much like that, as I'm sure, being a music lover, you agree.
Yes, yeah, totally.
And so thanks, Jeremy, for that email. And also Jonathan Davies. Jonathan Davies wrote to us about 160, again saying it was a great episode. Really liked what Caitlin, you had to say about Anthem, because it's possibly something, again, he's been considering. So hearing the press on it is always good before diving into it.
Did I save you some money? I hope I saved you some money.
At least until we see what it grows into, right? And if it's more worth the while down the line. And he was also enjoying Gwen's enthusiasm, as it was quite adorable, which I think we can all agree. I've been hearing that commentary from not just folks at the website, but anyone who's listened, that Gwen is adorable, and I appreciate it. And he, like us, is looking forward to the new Pokemon game. He actually answered our question, too. He thinks a dark grass type would be a good evolution to see from the grass type, which I think was what Solosi said, too, wasn't it? Did he say grass star? Or no, he said grass steel. Because we were saying...
Yes, I think he was talking about that.
Yeah.
It's all Greek to me. I'm sorry. I'm still such a Pokemon not in the know person.
You poking noob.
Yes. Oh, that's perfect.
And otherwise, he was talking about... for him, he was enjoying the discussion that we had about the bouncing off games. Because he's had some issues with some of the clunky GUI in Fallout 2. Which,
wow.
Right? And I'm like, I'll fight you. I love Fallout and Fallout 2. But I suppose it can be a little cumbersome, especially if you're going back to it. Depends on, of its time, it was probably fine. But I think on reflection, it is a little counterintuitive in some ways. And he was also talking about, oddly enough, that we brought it up in the episode too, was Day of the Tentacle. And he was saying how he didn't find the story very compelling, which, to each their own. And which was the great part, as I said about that discussion last week, or 2 weeks ago, was just that we all had a game that we're like, this game. But the other two of us were like, oh, I like that game. And it's the same thing. It's what's great about sharing your opinions on these games and doing it in a safe place with people who want to have this discourse is that, everyone's going to have differing opinions and everyone's going to have different feelings the way a game is going to hit them. It doesn't always have to be the same. And it's okay to talk about that and disagree, because that fuels passionate discussion, because you're going to find something, even if you don't fully agree with someone else's overall point of view on a game, there's still going to be elements of what they're talking about. They're like, oh, I can see your point there, and yeah, that's valid, but I don't like it because of this, and that's okay. We don't have to like everything. And it's the reviewer's dilemma, I guess, right?
Yeah. Opinions, man. We all got them.
There's a derogatory quote that relates to all that, and I can't remember what the heck it is now.
It involves a hole.
That's what it was.
In the body.
Moving along, though, thank you very much for the emails, Jonathan and Jeremy, and anyone else you want to send us emails, please do. I do read them. I do like responding to them. I love chatting with fans. I'll respond to you on Discord, because people respond to us there as well. And keep sending us questions. I didn't really put out a call for them on this one. Just this past week has been a blur for myself, getting ready to produce a film that we're shooting next month, so I've kind of been more focused on that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, my producing partner, my fiance, would be quite upset if I didn't do my work. So I don't want to sleep on the couch, and I want to make a movie and be good at it. So it's my third thing I'm getting into producing on, so I want to keep improving, and so it takes my attention, of course. But that being said, hey, Caitlin, do you remember our email address? Do you know where people can email us at?
Well, I believe it's podcast@rpgfan.com.
Ding, ding, ding. She wins.
Yes.
You can email us there with comments, questions, complaints. Send us spare potions. We would appreciate that. We also have other podcasts. We have Retro Encounter with weekly episodes. Yeah, Mike puts them out at a crazy rate.
Yeah, I still don't know how he's managed to do that. It's crazy.
He holds himself accountable.
He must have one of those, what are they called, time spinners from Harry Potter, where he just goes back in time,
right,
to do all of this, one episode, another episode, and then somehow have a real life in between all of it.
And still manage to play other games as well.
Yeah.
He stays on top of it. As far as the other podcast goes, Rhythm Encounter is still something you can listen to, even though we haven't put out a new episode for, has it been 2 years now? 3 years? It's been a while that we sadly have not had a new Rhythm Encounter.
Yeah. It's been about too, because I think the last episodes were in 2017.
But it's something that we haven't fully let die. It's out there.
Speaking of music of the year, we just recently posted it's a text only feature. There's no podcast version, but we did have a music of the year write up feature where we had side awards, and then we also had anyone who wanted to participate from our staff did their own personal awards, complete with samples. So if you are interested in that, it's still, as of this recording, it's still on our featured sidebar, but probably by the time we post, actually, it'll definitely be gone when we post this episode, because this episode will push it off, if nothing else.
I take priority.
But you can still find it, of course, by looking through our news archives and our features and whatnot. So if you like that, please do check that out.
Exactly, yeah. We've got plenty of music stuff going on, even if the podcast hasn't happened. People constantly talk about our music reviews, and it's one of the reasons they like coming to the website, because we have so many and keep on top of it, largely because Patrick is a machine, and Marcos is great at keeping on top of all that too.
Holy crap, Pat.
Right?
He just lives and breathes music.
So until Rhythm comes back, we've got all that to go off of. Until Retro comes out next week, I'm sure you have umpteen episodes that you can listen to. But until those next episodes come out, thank you so much for listening, everybody. For myself and Caitlin, keep playing games, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye.